Black the Name by D.B. Halpert. Narrated by the author, D.B. Halpert.
Chapter 6. Dead Wastes. The quaint, dust-laden abode is silent to the extent of being near to suffocating. Aldrin nearly speaks when a knock on the door breaks through the room. The door muffles. A meek voice calls in, breathing heavily. "Good outsiders, the Lord Kane has sent me with a gift and a message for you." Aldrin releases a breath built up from the rising tension of the silence and moves to the door, saying to the others, "What could that be?" Aldrin swings open the door to reveal on the other side a small boy in a robe that drapes down too long for his height. In the boy's hand rests a small box and a note. Extending them, he exclaims uncomfortably, looking at the man wrapped in a metal skeleton, "Mr. Stranger, these are for you from Lord Kane." Extending his hand, Aldrin accepts the items from the boy, who, after alleviating himself of the duty of delivery, immediately runs down the street, disappearing around a corner. Aldrin returns to the table and, unsealing the note, begins to read aloud. "Strangers from the plane of mortality, in light of a thorough calculation of thoughts based around our discussion, I have decided it is in both of our best interests for me to do all that is within my power to better secure assurance for your possible success in either path you wish to venture on upon leaving my town. Inside the box is a compass that has been infused with a kind of magic that detects other sources present. The detection is quite weak, so it will likely not point in the direction of minor items with magic possessed within, but will point toward things of great power, such as the dragon, the fabled temple, or the being whose land is said to lay between here and the temple. Also, contained with this letter is a message to the general shop that will provide him with the motivation to provide you with the rations he has in stock." Pearl twirls over to Aldrin's side, whisking the small box from his hand, before prancing back to the table. Popping off the small box's lid, Pearl reveals a small iron compass within. The needle within spins frantically counterclockwise, unyielding in its rotation. Removing it from the box, Pearl thrusts the small device against Elizabeth's face, which instinctively pulls away from being touched. Staring at the compass, Pearl jokingly declares her intent with the cold metal object. "All right, let's see if you set this thing off." "Nope, guess not," she continues as the needle remains spinning. Auburn's glare at Elizabeth intensifies as he leans back and strokes his chin, unsettling Elizabeth more as Boop's 5 eyes squint in return. The uncomfortable feeling overwhelms Elizabeth finally as she turns to Pearl, inquiring in a whispering tone, "What's his deal? He hasn't stopped staring at me since we got here." Pearl looks to Auburn, over Elizabeth, and then back, responding with a shrug. "Don't know. Perhaps someone with blue hair killed his parents." Before Pearl has a chance to ask anything, after she spins over next to Auburn, the red-skinned man stands to groan. "Well, if you have a way for it, it's to acquire gun supplies. Then we shouldn't hold your horses. I would personally like to get home sooner rather than later." Aldrin points with a nod, agreeing. "You're right about that. We can discuss plans on the way." Before turning and walking again to the door to be followed. Almost as soon as they had sat to talk to catch their breath, the 4 individuals, the outsiders of this town, emerge from the small, run-down building and begin their search for the general goods store. As they get to a corner, the discussion of escaping the realm they are in begins with Aldrin explaining, first, the information they know. "To our understanding, the plane of existence we are currently on is known as the plane of undeath. It truly doesn't matter how we got here at this point, only how we get out. From a discussion we had with the man referred to as Lord Cain, we learned of 2 alleged ways of transporting ourselves back to the plane of mortals. One north, 10 days, and one south. The one north is said to be guarded by the dragon, whose breath not only killed the people in the square, but also drew from their corpses those shadow things. Auburn interrupts Aldrin before he can continue. There's nae an option to be had. If you're true about your intent on going away, the other option is the unless sensible again. To which Aldrin retorts, continuing, the one to the south is only a legend at best, and in the letter is said to be beyond an area of land under some sort of control of a being known as the Colossal Collector, which we know literally nothing about. We also have guaranteed the Lord that we would not return and would leave in the morning. So whatever supplies we get is all we will have, save finding something in the wastes. After a short walk through the surprisingly calm streets of a town recently attacked by a dragon formed of the land's shadows, the 4 approach an old, decaying, long building with a shadowy, steeped roof, with a sign hung from the top of the door frame which reads, Smug's Fine Goods and Tools. Through the door waits a surprisingly cramped yet empty space of shelves, forming rows through the open floor space that lay mostly empty, with only an occasional object waiting to be purchased. A small bell rings when the group opens the door, alerting a pale, frail old man, waking him from a nap he was having in his chair behind a counter in the back of the store. Blinking to focus his eyes, the man calls out to the collection of strangers at the door. Welcome. How can I... Oh, the outsiders return. Enjoy the house. Pearl uncharacteristically clenches her fists as the question falls upon her ears. The image of Balasar, lifeless on the cold wood attic floor, flashes through her mind. She is broken from a growing state of rage by the soft touch of Elizabeth taking a gentle hold of her wrist. Stepping forward, Aldrin addresses the man. There was a problem with some vermin in the attic, but we aren't here about that. This note is for you. From his bag, Aldrin pulls the note that was connected to Cain's letter and, stepping to the counter, places it on the flaking, polished wood. Pulling the note to his face and drawing from below the counter a pair of spectacles, which he places upon the bridge of his nose, and scanning the parchment, the old man's eyes widen. Nodding and setting the note back behind himself, a few moments pass with Pearl impatiently exploring the confines of the building, and Elizabeth stands socially uncomfortable near the door, holding the solid obsidian orb of Boop, as Auburn keeps a nonchalant eye on her while he leans against a shelf. Re-emerging from another room, the old man holds an armful of small bundles of low parish rate foods. He drops them on the counter, explaining, Well, sorry it isn't much, but with the dragon preventing the north trade route from operating, this is all I have on hand. Aldrin gestures for Pearl to join him as he puts his bag down and begins placing bundles into it. Then turning to the old man, asks, How much do we owe you? Proudly, the old man grins with his hands on his hips. This is a favor for the Lord. No charge. Placing a few bundles into her bag as the aged shopkeep speaks, Pearl's eyes perk at the words, no charge, and she immediately runs to a back corner, returning with an old shovel with a dented head still caked with dried mud, and an old splintered wooden shaft, placing it on the counter. What about this? How much would you part from this for? Take it. I haven't used that thing in far too long for it to be worth anything to me. The old man chuckles, waving off to the side. Aldrin turns to Pearl as she draws the shovel up, thrusting it up into the air triumphantly, and shaking his head, already regretting what he is about to do, asks, And what exactly are you going to do with that? Pearl grins, resting the dirty, deformed shovel head over her shoulder, proudly boasting, Really? Don't know yet? We're going on a treasure hunt, right? Going to need a shovel. If you need more shovels, I have a few spare over there you can take as well. The old man adds, pointing to the corner Pearl claimed the other shovel from, where 4 others, all in significantly better repair and a cleaner condition, are stored. Walking to the shovels, Aldrin looks back to Pearl flabbergasted, and gesturing to the pile asks, "Really, Pearl? 5 shovels and you go with the only one that is both damaged and dirty. What am I supposed to do with you?" Auburn joins Aldrin with the shovels, grabbing one, interrupting any further conversation, speaking. "Do you two need a room? Grab a shovel and a quarter of the rations and let's get gone." Pearl prances to the other 2, where she pushes her fist playfully into Auburn's shoulder, jesting. "Now you're starting to sound like Aldrin. No fun, just a stick in the mud, keep to the task at hand, busybody. Boring!" Elizabeth walks to the traveling rations, putting a few in the bag given to her, and stepping to the shovels begins tying one to the bag with a strap on its side. With her bag filled to the point where she can just barely carry it, Elizabeth walks from the building. Pearl looks with bewilderment at the teen's focus before chasing after her from the building, followed by a slowly walking Auburn, whose eyes roll at Pearl's compassionate worry for what in his eyes is still a dangerous being to not be trusted. Finally, Aldrin grabs the last bundles of food, gesturing inquisitively to the shopkeep. "You are sure you don't need any compensation for this?" The aged man just shakes his head with an uncomfortable, forced grin as he grabs the note, crumpling it lengthways to his chest. "No, sir. It is to be considered a favor to the Lord. Don't worry about a thing." The moment comes when Aldrin has as well left through the old wood door. The aged man drops to the ground behind the counter, taking a deep breath, in a way akin to having just dealt with a life-threatening encounter. In the street, Pearl runs to Elizabeth, calling, "Lizzie, wait! Where are you going?" Not stopping, Elizabeth responds softly as Pearl reaches her side. "I needed air. That Auburn guy just keeps staring at me. It started making me uncomfortable." "Oh, all right. So why are you going this way?" Elizabeth stops and, blinking her eyes twice, seemingly for the first time since leaving the shop, and takes in her surroundings. Rubble lies where buildings should be. In another silent section of town Elizabeth has led the group to. A soft wind tosses dust underfoot as the 3 adults stare at the young girl. After a short few moments, Pearl's hand finds Elizabeth's shoulder, and the group returns the other way, back into the rented house. Light leaves the land once more, as night besets the town, and the hours of darkness pass with an eerie calm. Light returns as the gleeful voice of Pearl, prancing through the hall, rings into each room, accompanied by a knock. "Rise and shine, sleepyheads! Time to ship up and ship out!" After a few moments, Auburn emerges and, rubbing his eyes, questions Pearl. "How is it that you are so chipper?" Pearl gives a nod and salutes from the staircase, responding, "We're heading out on an adventure! This is reason enough to put some pep in our step." Aldrin opens his door, entering the hall, and turning to Auburn, he groans, still waking himself. "You get used to it. If you stick around, that is." Pearl turns away, calling back to Aldrin, "You know you love me!" With that, Pearl trounces down the stairs, where she finds Elizabeth already waiting, eating a small breakfast. Pearl is taken aback for a second as a grin takes her face. "Well, well! Someone was awake earlier than me. That's a first." Keeping the smile, Pearl joins Elizabeth at the table, swiping a fragment of food and laughing as she takes a bite, before speaking with a mouthful. "So now we wait for the boys. Funny." With the food gone, after several minutes, the 2 others step down the stairs, at the bottom of which Aldrin props the long barrel of his projectile weapon against his shoulder, calling to the table, "Let's head out." With the lead taken, the others follow, and the 4 step out into the streets. There is movement through the town as the group travels to the outer wall. Beyond the wall waits the wastes, once more for strangers to once again venture into. And with a dead, dry, still air pressing down on the flat, obstruction-free expanse of dust. With no more time for their welcome in the small town and a heading southward in this plane of existence from a local, the group sets off. The light of the first day out of town rises and falls as the day passes. The group marches in an ever-straight line to the incessant humming of Pearl, gleeful to be on the move once more. And as the darkness of this plain's night begins setting in, the four settle into a small area for rest. Silent sleep takes the group, and their journey's beginning turns over, progressing their time in the land of maddening sorrow and death ever forward. The second morning's light grows unwarming to a cold white across the landscape. In the southward direction that the four look to travel, the flat nothingness finally bulges and folds into hills upon the horizon. The day's journey of walking is again quiet as the group continues their trek. The sands on the hills shifts under a light breeze that passes over them, and after the light grows to its peak and diminishes to almost complete darkness, a broken structure rises from the horizon. Seeing the collapsed remnants of the fallen building as a strategic place to rest, a safety point, Aldrin gestures towards it. You know, we can probably push ourselves a little and camp in there. Prevent some angles of approach if there are any other creatures out here beyond us. With a nod, Auburn takes his bow from his shoulder as he breaks from the group toward the tower. You ken it will be dark when we get there, right? Pearl runs to Auburn's side, placing a hand on his shoulder, gleefully exclaiming, I think the point is so we can rest there. I meant that if something else had the identical idea, it will have the advantage of the dark. An hour's time passes as the collapsed structure grows ever closer with each step, as the light wanes until complete darkness again ushers in the night. With the darkness setting in, Aldrin lowers a set of goggles over his eyes, accompanied by a zipping whirl that buzzes, birthing a green luminous that flickers across the lenses. A device that provides him a short 60 feet of vision in the black as shades of green. Though the other three have no outside equipment to aid their vision, they are not blind in the pitch darkness of night on the plain of undeath. Pearl, Auburn, and Elizabeth, unlike Aldrin, are not human. Not fully. Born different species of humanoid beings, the three of them have a common trait: the ability to view the environment around them for a short distance in the presence of little to no light. While each experiences the vision differently, shades of gray, where the eyes predict through innate magic what things would appear as if light were present, infrared viewing the presence of heat or lack thereof, or the pulsing glow of life forces, the ability to see using the radiance of a living creature's soul, or the vacuous void of a creature without one, through the way soul radiance refracts off nearby surfaces. The four individuals cautiously approach the fallen tower, not blind, but cautious with their limited ranges of vision. The old tower lays shattered near where its base had been when it stood, becoming an open tube through the disheveled doorway. Any wood that once had stood as separate floors or furnishings has long since decayed, becoming one with the sandy dust underfoot, which gathers in a pile in the tower's corpse. Boastfully, Pearl steps into the inner space of the ruined tower, with splayed arms and elated steps. 4 strides through the door, Pearl turns to her companions, calling out, See? Nothing to worry about. As Pearl stands proudly within, the 2 men point their weapons to a figure rising behind the arrogant individual. The shifting of the sand like powder falling from the figure grows louder as a large, malformed head with bulbous, pus-filled pockets that push forward around and seemingly enlarging one of the being's eyes. The creature rises 5, 10, 13 feet into the air. Like the head, a giant hunchbacked figure ripples with muscles through deformity of bubbling, oozing sores that are caked with moist dust across the upper reaches of the curved overspine and the creature's right arm. The deformed being holds in one large muscular hand a stone club the size of a small tree, and raising it above its head with a grin, while the other arm and hand, small from the being's deformity, clenches in a strained fist. It lets out a groaning yell, swinging the club downward toward Pearl in the moment she turns to see what the others are aiming at. All in the instant, the two release the restraints of their projectiles. With a thunderous clap, a spray of sparks, and a blinding light that to those adjusted to an environment without any is crippling. A metal orb the size of a grape leaps from the end of Aldrin's metal tube, and in an instant, faster than the human eye can perceive, makes impact with the giant's shoulder. At the same moment of the propelling explosion, the sound of a releasing bowstring strum echoes under the crack of Aldrin's weapon, sending 3 arrows through the air, piercing into the monster's chest. The giant reels from the rapid impacts before continuing through the crushing motion, missing Pearl by an inch as she tumbles out of the way, letting the momentous impact send powder up like water splashing with the force. Looking up, the small eye of the disfigured giant squints, locking with the eyes of Aldrin. A thread-like streak of magic energy flashes between the two, and Aldrin seizes up in pain, stumbling away and around the outer edge of the collapsed building. Seeing Aldrin pull away in pain causes a drive to action to form within Elizabeth, who steps between him and the ugly creature, calling out first in the common tongue to her companions. "If this is the plane of undeath, and that is one of the denizens, I wonder if it fears the light. Cover your eyes!" After that, Elizabeth's voice sounds out the sound of a choir, the language of celestials, taught to her in the prayers Bartholomew had her say for Archangel's protection and guidance. Elizabeth presses her hand to her forehead, which begins to glow, continuing in a call to the behemoth in a way that is roughly translated to be, "The light of the heavens fills him with strength to protect the ones who hold his faith. Archangel, be my shield when it comes to night, and be the sword to split the dark when the sun brings light." The large wart-infested arm holding the club raises up to block the light, and the massive form turns, running deeper into the tunnel-like ruins, terrified. With the monster's back turned, Pearl pounces with a quick stab into its lower side, causing it to stumble against the wall in pain before she flips off the giant's fleshy thigh. 2 more arrows zip through the air, piercing again into the rippling muscular figure of the monstrous being. Arrows free and finding their impact on the creature, Auburn runs around the building, the way of Aldrin, to cut off any escape. The giant turns back, looking to the white and gold radiance, and with a yell like a blaring tuba, pushes itself away, emerging through the broken top of the ruined tower. The head of the threatening, disformed giant peeks out in a fearful hurry, when another thunderous crack rings out from Aldrin, hunched over in pain, leaning against the wall. In a split moment, 2 more arrows find purchase, as riding the giant, which falls like a tree, Pearl removes her blade from the base of the being's skull. Walking quickly to Aldrin, Pearl gives a light, friendly shove into Auburn's shoulder, who scowls, in return asking, "Now which one of you can tell me what that was?" Aldrin looks up from his hunched-over position, unable to fully straighten his back, as he says in a growl of pain, "That was a Fomorian." "Aldrin, what happened to your face? And your back? That's not contagious, is it?" Pearl exclaims as she recoils from her friend. "And how do you know that?" "No. This is a temporary version of the same curse forever put on Fomorians for their arrogance. It should fade in a couple of hours. As for how I know anything about it, when I was looking into Nikki, there was a book about curses that was in the reading I was given. Didn't help anything with that, but I learned about Fomorians there." Pearl's demeanor instantly goes cold with Aldrin's words drifting into her ears. "Can we please not use that name? ever again. From the other side of the larger-than-a-stagecoach corpse, the white and gold light begins to grow as Elizabeth makes her way cautiously through the structure, summoning forth the friendly floating orb, Boop, to her side, that seeing through the dark notices Pearl's intensity and silently hovering behind her lets out a loud boop before rocketing upward to avoid the imminent threat of her blade. Just missing Elizabeth's pet, Pearl's mood changes like the flip of a switch as with a chuckle she returns her blade to its place on her hip, walking back into the tower around the huge body, inquiring, "So, who gets to stay up for 2 more hours?" Ignoring Pearl, Auburn turns to Aldrin, curious, pointing to the metal tube. "Now what would you call that thing? You used it before, now here." Aldrin tucks the object in question away, and turning uncomfortably to the other man in the dark, groans in response. "It's a device of my design. I call it a rifle." With conversation closed, the groups again settle in for rest as the black of the night drags on. Only an hour after the encounter, while 3 of the 4 travelers lay resting, they once again wake by a whiny, excited greeting. "Hello over there!" Pearl, being the one already awake, whispers to the others as they groaningly come to consciousness. "Guys, someone's coming. From the direction we came from." Rubbing only recently fresh sleep from his eyes, Aldrin steps to Pearl, peeking through the disheveled doorway. "It can't actually be him, can it?" Hearing the question in Aldrin's words, Elizabeth runs to Pearl's side. "Your friend Balasar? The one you were talking about before?" Shaking his head, Aldrin turns to the young girl. "No, Balasar is dead. We met another individual walking to the town, a confused mage of sorts. There's a possibility that the man coming is him." It is at the moment all 3 leer back through the broken tower's doorway when the voice, much closer and much louder, rings out directly next to them. "What are we looking at?" The 3 turn rapidly in surprise as the man in long purple robes and a large, brimmed, tall-pointed purple hat stands next to them with a wistful look of wanderlust painted across his face. His head cocked, the strange man continues in his almost whiny voice that seems strangely happy, pulling a strange blue and silver rod from a bag not large enough to fit it without the use of magic.
"Friends, I was thinking, and I need to give you something as a thank you for bringing me to this town safely."
Aldrin takes the metal pole from the man cautiously, asking, "And what is it?" The man in purple tilts his head inquisitively, reaching for the pole.
"Oh, interesting piece, good sir. The lightning bolt tip designs would support the hypothesis the creator intended this object to have a connection to electricity. And the general shape and balance makes it feel as though it is intended to be thrown. This could be a javelin of lightning. Where did you get this?"
Elizabeth looks to the stranger with concern, softly explaining, "You just handed it to him a moment ago. Are you all right?"
"Never better, since these 2 brought me to this town. I will say, though, I was expecting it to be at least a little livelier."
"Sir, we are 2 days south of town."
"We are? Well, how in the world did I get here? I am sorry. I need to introduce myself, now only to remember my name."
Tapping his chin contemplatively, the man simply lays down, falling to sleep. Pearl looks to the other 2 with wide eyes, whispering loudly,
"Anyone else confused?"
Aldrin turns to Pearl to respond before Boop begins gnawing on one end of the javelin, small sparks leaping from the metal rod across his saliva and rippling through the soft tissue of his palate. Rolling his eyes, Aldrin releases the pole into Boop's maw, continuing his response. "He was like this when we met him, Pearl." Auburn shouts to the conversation in a growling groan. "Go to sleep!" With Auburn's outburst, Pearl's hands shoot up into the air while her voice, full of sarcasm, whips back.
All right, we'll pick this up in the morning.
Elizabeth and Aldrin lay back down, with Boop gnawing on his new magically enchanted toy, and they let the night take them once more. The remaining hours of darkness pass uneventfully before light again floods the land. As Auburn shakes each person awake, the four collect, looking down upon the still sleeping, robed individual. Moments of quiet pass, with only the slight buzzing sound of Boop's chewing crackling through the air, as Pearl asks,
What do we do with Sleeping Beauty?
Turning and stepping away, Auburn gruffly responds,
Nothing. Leave him.
Elizabeth whips around the group, calling to Auburn's back.
We can't leave him.
Auburn turns back, growling just softer than anger.
Then ye give in your bag and ye stay here. But I counted the amount of supplies we have for a 10-day trip. We barely have enough for 4. And I personally would prefer having at least a chance of getting home instead of starving in the wastes.
Pearl gasps with exasperated concern.
Auburn! Look, I barely know you folk, and would much prefer a babbling bod jigger with electricity spares, or that.
Auburn exclaims, raising his pointed hand in the direction of Elizabeth.
Look, I'm not even sure I can trust you folk, but I'm risking my life to have a go to get home. I'm not after risking my own mare if I have to.
Suddenly, the robed figure steps to the side, revealing himself behind Auburn, no longer on the ground where he had slept. Raising a resolute instructor's finger, the even stranger chimes in.
Excuse me, but if a lack of sustenance is what you fear, I may be able to help. I have everything I need right here,
he exclaims, patting a seemingly empty sack slung over his shoulder. Pulling from within the bag a loaf of bread whose shape was not represented by the bag's outer appearance. The man takes a bite as he continues speaking with a full mouth.
Son, where are we going?
Pearl gives a shrug, walking to Auburn and the purple figure, and putting an arm around both, says in an inspired tone,
The future, and the plane of mortals, which we call home.
With an overly jubilant stride, Pearl releases Auburn from her grasp, stepping again southward. Within moments, the entire group is once again marching together with the sole intent to make it home. The ambient light that radiates the land grows to its peak and begins to wane across many hours of walking by the group, revealing upon the horizon a wide, slowly rolling river. Stone pillars capped with strange stone tops flank a wide set of steps that lead up to a bridge that spans the entirety of the river. The marching party stops yards from the steps, looking to them with a weary concern for more creatures lying in wait. A silent moment passes while Boop drifts slowly down behind Elizabeth, who walks to the river's edge, looking through the water's surface and under the stone bridge. With a careful studying of the distance, Boop grins as the small girl calls back to him.
Okay, Boop. We can try. Send me across.
Receiving permission, Boop's telekinetic eye locks onto Elizabeth's back, and with a surge of energy, the small girl is launched up and over the river, with the small pet yipping, Boop! Seeing the more exciting path across the water, Pearl runs to where Elizabeth was standing, yelling as she gets into position.
Do me! Launch me!
And with a nod from Elizabeth, Boop complies, launching Pearl over the river, before quickly flying to join the two on the far side. Rolling his eyes, Auburn groans, striding up the steps onto the bridge, which from ages of disrepair consists of a walking path that waves rather than being smooth, with a section near the far end collapsed completely. Pillars like the two nearest him rise like a mirror on the other coast, with a similar stone cap on the left pillar, and a ghostly blue flame eerily flickering without a fuel source a foot above the right pillar's top. A hunched figure in a tattered hooded cloak squats, shaking, past the steps in the dimly glowing light. With each slow, careful step that draws Auburn and Aldrin closer to the same end of the bridge, the figure remains unmoving, trembling to himself in place. All the while, Pearl, Elizabeth, and Boop creep closer along the shore, all five weary from their most recent interaction with a being from outside the city. With a cautious footfall halfway across the bridge, a sudden chill takes the air around Aldrin and Auburn. An updraft around the two on the bridge gusts powerfully for a moment, leaving three semi-transparent, ghostly white and blue figures floating around them. The sudden appearances break Pearl's focus on approaching the trembling individual, as she calls out in worry, "Aldrin, where's Purple?" Aldrin looks appreciative of Pearl's concern for a moment, before the look fades with the finishing question. Raising the barrel of his rifle to one of the ghostly figures, he calls back, "Drawing in the dust! Back there!" The small, trembling figure turns to Pearl as she calls out, revealing under the hood the hunched figure's black, leathery skin as it releases an unearthly scream like nails on a chalkboard. The strange being's maw drops an unnatural distance for how it was closed. The scream sends waves of invisible energy out, pushing away the dust in a ring around him that strikes Pearl, who cups her ears in pain. With the billowing scream, Aldrin's finger pulls the rifle's trigger. The thunderous crack echoes out while another grape-sized ball of metal shoots through one of the floating beings, ricocheting off the stone cap of the near pillar, freeing a flickering beam of light from within. The light lasers out of the small crack toward the form the bullet phased through, causing smoke to rise from the surface of its form. The spirit writhes in pain, moving rapidly out of the path of the light, releasing a cavernous, echoing scream. In a moment of quick thinking, Boop drops Pearl's side outside the ring, and with his telekinetic ray pushes her free. In the same instant, another of Boop's eyes locks onto the screaming form. A hairline of black-purple energy interlocks the two, and the strange fiend recoils from Boop. Catching herself on the ground, as dust tosses under her from the impact, Pearl takes a breath and nods to the floating orb. In a surge of adrenaline, Pearl goes from being on the ground to a full sprint away from Elizabeth's direction, throwing a small dagger at the side of the screaming creature. The wail doesn't stop, as the impact causes the bridge guardian to withdraw away. But turning to the woman, anger beams from the being's eyes as it begins shuffling after her. With the strange thing's attention, Pearl calls to Boop and Elizabeth. "I got Singer's attention! I'll keep it distracted! You help the boys!" Elizabeth and Boop return a knowing nod, turning their attention quickly to the bridge. A whirlwind of ethereal ghostly forms spiral erratically around Auburn and Aldrin as two arrows leap forth from within. From the tempest, the spirits in intervals begin to break from circling the two men, passing across the ring, fading through the two who grit with each pass as they feel their life force, their very souls, being torn. A haunted moan ripples through the air, with the torrent of anger directed at the men on the bridge, softer than the scream emanating from the being who chases Pearl, but more intense. The sound becomes deafening for Elizabeth as she focuses her attention that way, drawing on whatever sits within her in an attempt to produce magical energy to strike out at these things that would harm those who would help her. The more Elizabeth focuses, the further the screams sound. Boop's eye of telekinesis pulls the lightning javelin from his mouth, the rippling waves of energy reverberating amongst themselves as he manipulates the pole for a second. And with a thrust, it vanishes, and a crackling bolt of lightning forms in an arc through the ring over Aldrin and Auburn. Thunder roars from the near horizontal lightning strike, and Elizabeth stands frozen in place. The memory of the night that started this path for her flashes through the young girl's head. The roar of the thunder and the whirling distant screams around her makes Elizabeth feel as though she has been transported, replaced back where it started, when Bartholomew slammed open her door. Firing another shot, Aldrin watches the bullet pass through the ghostly forms without any effect, and thinking to the light's effect, calls out just audible through the sound of screams and moans. Physical attacks aren't doing anything. If you can produce any aggressive magic, use that, or break the caps on the pillars. With a groan of frustration, Auburn throws his bow back over his shoulder, and with a deep exhalation, his hand erupts into flame. With a throwing motion, a small ball of fire leaps from Auburn's hand, which impacts the surface of one of the spectral assailants. Boop repositions again, letting his chilling eye stalk activate toward one of the spirits, solidifying a veiny construct of ice within the ghostly figure. Falling to the ground, the ice structure shatters, pulling wispy essence from within the form. In the same instant, Boop's telekinetic eye squints at the damaged pillar cap, and with a wave of force pressing into it, the stone object cracks before bursting off. The sudden onslaught of light from the ghostly flickering blaze revealed from beneath the stone ruptures outward, catching one of the aggressive spirits. Appearing as though being burned alive, the spirit freezes in place, unable to move as its moans become screams. A second passes as the other spirits back away from the light source, watching the third vaporize and be drawn into the flame. The spirits that remain turn from Aldrin and Auburn, seeing prey in the form of a purple-robed figure. Looking up as the spirits approach, the stranger simply tilts his head, saying gently,
"You don't look friendly."
Silence grabs the air after the stranger speaks, and a wind breaks to flow around the man. The spirits freeze in place, staring at him. Pressing his hand in an outward circle, a glyph draws itself in an empty space before him, in purple. Head tilting to the other shoulder, the man lets a grin form on half his face. Tapping the glyph's center with a limp finger, sends a shockwave of energy out, dispersing the two spirits and releasing the two ghostly flames from the two remaining capped pillars. Aldrin, Auburn, and Boop look in bewilderment to the powerful individual for seconds before a voice regathers their collective attention. Elizabeth, knocked from her feet from the shockwave, calls out to the three, pushing herself from the ground. "Guys! Pearl!" The three whip their heads around to see Pearl still running, but tiring, just beyond the encroaching ring of energy from the screaming creature. Aldrin aims his rifle, steadying it, and calls back to the purple figure. "So you're actually some kind of wizard? Well, we could use your help up here." The shot rings out, making an impact on the being's shoulder, throwing it off balance to the ground and freeing Pearl for a moment from its chase. Pearl stops, only for a second to catch her breath, as she turns to see the hunched figure running in the direction of Aldrin and toward the ringing from the gunshot. Elizabeth, still overwhelmed from the memories forcing their way into the forefront of her mind, stands motionless as her vision, only too late, returns from a foggy blur. The circle of pulsing, compressive energy engulfs the trembling girl, and the piercing ring of the constant shrieking drops Elizabeth in pain to her knees, desperately cupping her ears. Feeling success in breaking a trespasser, the screaming figure begins to focus on Elizabeth, walking slowly toward her. Two arrows leap from Auburn's bow, one of which drives into the being's shoulder, the other digs its way into the dust many yards past its target. Auburn looks to Aldrin as he pulls another arrow, preparing to shoot.
"The ghost took a lot out of me. It's a bookworm. Man telling us what this thing is."
Aldrin fires another shot, falling back from the force, and looking up to Auburn, shakes his head. "I don't know, but you're right, the spirits trained me pretty well too." Boop's eye stalks glimpse behind him to see the creeping being almost within arm's reach of Elizabeth, who tightens into herself, gritting in pain for a second before letting out a scream. Boop spins quickly around as images again pass through Elizabeth's head of the rain pouring onto her and the pain in her skull from the magic that forced her body to move without her consent. A pink, glittering thread whips out across the ground, tethering itself to the screaming creature from one of the four eye stalks, and the telekinetic eye locks as well to the target releasing a pulse that throws the monster tumbling back through the dust, silencing it temporarily. Pearl, without a single thought, seizes the opportunity provided by the temporary silence of the dust's bone-grinding sound, rushes to Elizabeth, and grabbing her, lifts her away. The creature stands and begins to release its scream again, but with Pearl just beyond the outer edge of its energy, it begins to shuffle toward her. Aldrin begins lining up a shot when Auburn's hand lands on his shoulder. Auburn's hand begins to glow a warm orange light as Aldrin wells with warm inner strength. Another shot rings out, making impact with the strange being's head, throwing it back a final time into the dust where it lays motionless. Pearl sets Elizabeth down, turning to Aldrin with a laugh.
You see? I knew you would be useful one day.
Before any more jubilance can be had, Auburn quickly rises from the knee he and Aldrin took, and with fury in each step strides to the man in purple, yelling with a pointed finger into the man's chest.
Why is it that you took so long to help me? Are you not interested in making it to the material plane? If you are, well, I got news for you. We need each other to get there.
With the aggression in his voice, Auburn feels a sudden pain in his chest. Grasping at the source, he stumbles back, propping himself against one of the pillars with a grimace. In a move of adrenaline, Elizabeth stands and sprints past Pearl across the bridge to Auburn's side with hands outstretched. Auburn tries to pull away, but feeling the pain of his organs slowly decaying from the assault the spirits dealt to him, he can't. Elizabeth rests one of her hands softly on Auburn's chest and the other on his abdomen, calmly imparting upon him, "It's all right. I can help you. Your body fell prey to a large amount of necrotic energy. Father Bartholomew saved a man from similar energies. I can't do as much as he did, but I have a gift that lets me heal people. Let me heal you." With a concerned, distrusting look, but no words through the crippling pain within Auburn, he only nods in response. With permission, Elizabeth lets her eyes close as a familiar gold and white light begins to radiate from her hands with a far stronger intensity than it had in the destroyed tower. The light grows for a moment, developing a soft thrum when Elizabeth's eyes shoot open, beaming with the beautiful power of a glowing sun, but not blindingly bright. The light disappears after only a second and a half, enough time for Pearl and Aldrin to glimpse, only barely, the visage of Elizabeth, of what to them appeared for a fragment of a short time, a set of glowing, angelic, ethereal wings. The light passes into Auburn, absorbed by his body, and his breath regulates with a heavy gasp. Elizabeth sits back on her heels with relief of success, letting Auburn stand. On his feet, Auburn grabs his bag, growling to the others,
"It'll be dark in a moment. We make camp on the other side of the bridge."
The radiance over the landscape fades to the blackness of night once more, and the light of the day returns, with the hours in between passing with an uneasy calm. Aldrin, Auburn, Boop, Elizabeth, Pearl, and the strange companion in purple rise and pack their things, preparing to venture forth once more. Only a handful of yards from where the group had their rest, Auburn calls out to them,
"Stop!"
and presenting the compass they had been given in the town, continues,
"Look, the needle stopped whirling. That means it has something to point to. And since we've only been out for 3 or 10 days, my dash is on the thing that we want to juke. It's close."
Stepping away, Pearl asks rhetorically,
"So what do you want us to do? Wait for it to get us?"
"We walk around," Aldrin proposes, before continuing, not letting Pearl retort on the rhetorical nature of her question. "We set the compass down and wait an hour. That way we know which direction, if any, this thing is moving. So we could move slightly the other way." With no other plan on dealing with the possibly encroaching threat, the others gather around as the compass is set into the dust and conversation is struck. "So, Auburn, where exactly is it that you come from?" With a weary squint, Auburn hesitates, but responds,
"Have you ever heard of the deep world?"
Aldrin looks confused at the place's name, but Pearl perks up with a sudden interest.
Yeah, Vincent J. went there once. It is an entire world under the surface of the one we live on.
Auburn nods, confirming Pearl's memory, continuing.
Well, it just so happens that I hunt in the deep world for a clan of outcasts from Dwarven society.
How did that get you here?
One of my trips brought the lads and I to a clearing where a wee altar stood. Jacob wanted to investigate the altar. He activated some kind of magic, and suddenly it was here. Your turn. How is it that ye ended up in this pit?
Well, there was this thing with a cursed dagger in someone's chest, stealing their soul, and in the process of freeing them, Aldrin, a close friend by the name of Balasar, and I found ourselves on a small island in a black lake. We walked for a couple of days and found the town, and met you guys.
What happened to your other friend, Balasar?
Pearl freezes at the question, and Aldrin leans in to respond.
He died.
The night I found Elizabeth outside the town walls, I was having his body incinerated in the forge, so he could not come back from the dead. Auburn gives an acknowledging nod before focusing with a disapproving and untrusting look on Elizabeth.
All right. Apologize for your loss. No, it's your car, Bairn. How far did you get here?
Elizabeth's eyes widen in astonishment of not expecting for it to come to her to express the events which led to her arrival in this plane of existence. Hands gripping into fists with flashes of the events of that night flicker through her mind. Elizabeth silently sighs in relief as Pearl points to the compass, stating,
No time to keep up our chit-chat. The needle's moved.
Auburn looks from Elizabeth just before her sigh, responding quickly to Pearl.
That has. South by southeast. Let's go.
Rising quickly and lifting their bags over their shoulders, the group once again is on the move. The landscape remains plain as the light of the day grows and fades to night, passing uneventfully by for the group. The light returns and fades, returning again. The lands traversed by the being that they hope to avoid at least lie barren of any other threats. And with careful attention given to the compass, the being is avoided as the journey watches the needle move from southwest to west to north and down to the east until a massive hill rises upon the horizon to which the needle redirects. Pearl raises her shovel, exclaiming,
Well, looks like the temple's under there. Let's get digging.